At this point with Drake, the number of losses he's been racking up is coming in so fast, it's practically impossible to keep count. Every time you turn around, he's taking another hit, professionally, artistically, and in his reputation. But out of all the setbacks he's faced recently, one seems to stand out the most: the cancellation of his Anita Max Wintour dates in Australia and New Zealand. And the reasons being given for why it all ended? They might just be the worst explanation I've ever heard from Drake and his team. Drake's been pushing this Anita Max Wintour for a while now, and people expected him to bring in massive crowds, but out of nowhere, he just cancels the remaining dates. At first, his team tried to pass it off by saying, due to a scheduling conflict, 4 Drake's 16 sold-out shows in Australia and New Zealand will be postponed. They use those words, scheduling conflict, like we'd all nod in agreement and move on. But honestly, if you know anything about touring, you know that an artist at Drake's level doesn't just come across a scheduling conflict at the last minute like that. You don't map out dates, announce a tour, start selling tickets for months, and then suddenly say, oh wait, we messed up the calendar. That's laughable. The official statement goes on to make even more ridiculous claims, like something about a 12-day gap between shows that apparently made it impossible to stay down under. And they're trying to say that this gap, this chunk of time, was such a huge problem that Drake's team simply had to pull the plug? Come on, the entire idea is so flimsy. If they knew about a long gap when they first scheduled the dates, and trust me, they absolutely had to have known, why wouldn't they fix it beforehand? If it was truly an issue, they would have rearranged the tour a long time ago. That's how professional tours work. Everything is planned months in advance to accommodate the logistics, the crew, the artists, and everybody involved. You do not just discover a 12-day gap last minute. The excuse is terrible. It's one of the most pathetic cover stories we've ever heard from Drake and OVO. It's so obvious they're hiding something. And once you peel back the layers, what you see is a tour that likely wasn't selling as well as they'd hoped. If they kept going, they risked standing on stage in half-empty arenas or watching tickets float around at discounted prices. Basically the kind of embarrassment that Drake can't afford right now, especially with all eyes on him. If you followed the Anita Max Wintour at all, you've probably seen clips of these concerts. People have complained that the stage design looks uninspired, that Drake barely sings or raps live, and that half the time it feels like you're at karaoke. There's no energy to bring fans something memorable. The guy who used to dominate rap, overshadowing everyone else, is now struggling to fill seats. And it's not just seats in the US or Canada. We're talking Australia and New Zealand, places he doesn't visit that often, which means you'd expect people to jump at the chance to see him. Instead, he's faced with half-full venues and an awkward stage presence. This begs the question, how did Drake go from dominating streaming charts and commanding massive audiences to failing to sell out these shows? Part of it, if you ask me, is that he's run away from real challenges for too long. He spent years ducking Kendrick Lamar, trying to stay ahead with mainstream attention rather than delivering truly great music. Yes, Drake has hits, but more and more, fans are catching on to the idea that he's chasing superficial popularity rather than cultivating genuine artistry. The moment you see your ticket sales start to falter, as an artist, you have two choices. Either you accept the smaller numbers and do your best for your fans who still show up, or you cancel and try to blame it on a scheduling conflict. Drake chose the second option, and it's backfiring in the worst possible way. What's worse is how Drake's circle is now trying to twist the narrative. There's this notion that maybe the industry is against Drake, that there's some big conspiracy to block him. They did it with his album streaming numbers, saying it was sabotage or that algorithms were out to get him. Now it's the same story with the tour, but that doesn't add up. If the demand was there, if the fans truly wanted these shows, there would be no reason to cancel, no matter how bad the schedule looked. You'd push through for the guaranteed success. But that's the problem. It's not guaranteed, and Drake's camp knows it. Also, if the so-called scheduling conflict was real, why wouldn't they simply reschedule certain dates or move them around to accommodate the gap? If you care about your fans, you'll make adjustments so they can still see you. Instead, they axe the entire run, which tells you the demand just isn't enough to warrant the effort or the potential embarrassment. Now, some people want to believe Drake left the tour because of personal issues or some behind-the-scenes legal stuff. But if that were true, we wouldn't see him continuing his usual antics. He'd probably be holed up somewhere handling that business. Instead, he's still posting, still out and about, still pulling the same moves he's always done. So there's no reason to think he's ducking out for anything more personal or severe. This is about business, ticket business, and he clearly isn't comfortable facing the reality of diminished interest. Another detail, OVO artists and team members were already down in Australia and New Zealand for this tour, expecting to be there for a while. They wouldn't have gone to the hassle of traveling if they anticipated a major gap problem. So it's bizarre to suggest they all realized, out of nowhere, that a break in the schedule was unworkable. They wouldn't have been there ready to perform if it was that big an issue. Let's be real. Drake has lost a lot of fans after consistently running from serious hip-hop competition and focusing on half-hearted pop crossovers. You can't keep alienating the people who respect rap skill and artistry, then expect them to fill seats forever. That's where the slump comes in. Suddenly, the cracks are showing. He's trying to rely on mainstream popularity, but the mainstream moves on quickly if you're not delivering quality or evolving in a compelling way. Look at the contrast. Kendrick Lamar and The Weeknd have both launched huge stadium tours, packing the biggest venues around the globe. Meanwhile, Drake, once rap's unstoppable force, can't keep his mid-sized arenas at capacity, especially in markets he hasn't played in a while. That says everything about where his career is right now. It's not just about the numbers. It's about the excitement and anticipation he used to generate. That hype is fading. People are no longer running to see Drake the way they did a few years back. When you remember Drake's ongoing tension with Kendrick Lamar, you realize this has been brewing for a long time. Ever since Kendrick dropped those bars on The Heart Part 5, or put out statements challenging the top spot in rap, Drake has been uneasy. Instead of responding with music that truly raises the bar, he's ducked the challenge. And fans notice that. They see the laziness creeping in, Drake relying on formulaic hooks and gimmicky releases. The real question now is, where does Drake go from here? Because this fiasco of a tour, plus the disappointing performance of his recent album, shows that the old strategy of relying on mainstream hype isn't enough. People are reading the headlines about canceled shows, empty seats, and messy excuses. No matter how big your name is, that kind of PR is brutal. And let's not forget, he's apparently trying to spin this as an industry block, the same way he spun lower album streams. But that can only fool so many people for so long. At the end of the day, if you can't sell tickets, you can't blame the entire industry or claim sabotage. Either the fans want to see you or they don't. If they don't, that's on you as an artist, especially if you've been drifting further and further from your roots. Drake has spent so much time chasing pop stardom and easy hits that his core rap fan base feels betrayed. And once that hardcore crowd leaves, it's tough to get them back. So is Drake's career completely over? That might be dramatic, but it's definitely at the lowest point we've seen so far. He isn't winning new fans, he isn't exciting old fans, and he's not carrying himself like an artist hungry to prove something. He's more like a pop star who's aging out of the top spot, clinging to the vestiges of popularity. And a canceled tour is the biggest sign, yet that he can't keep faking it. A full-blown flop in another country is basically the worst look for someone who's been bragging about his global dominance for years. Maybe Drake should see this as a wake-up call. If ticket sales are so bad you have to invent a laughable scheduling conflict story, you need to rethink everything. If you can't bring genuine energy to the stage or create set designs that captivate people, then maybe it's time to focus on real artistry again. Maybe even drop the half-baked releases and show the world you still have some passion left, because right now the tone is desperate. Canceling tours, making excuses, leaning on the same old, everyone's out to get me shtick. This is not the Drake who once dropped game-changing albums and shook the hip-hop world. This is Drake scrambling to keep some kind of footing in an industry that's fast outgrowing him. Let me know what you think about how Drake canceled this tour, the confusion surrounding it, and whether you believe his career is finally entering freefall. Are we seeing the last days of Drake at the top? Because from where I'm standing, it sure feels like the dream is dying. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and remember to like and subscribe. Let's keep talking about how all of this might be the final chapter in Drake's once unstoppable run.